Hello, everyone. I hope this day finds everyone in good health amid this pandemic. I have a few crazy stories for you regarding violent and unfaithful women. Stay tuned. My best friend caught his wife cheating this morning with his coworker and shot the man in his house. He's in jail and everybody's in shock. Help me out. Okay? First off, let me start by saying this is my best friend of 12 years. He's a great guy who works hard and is passionate at his career. Anyways, a little after 11 a.m. this morning, he returned from his work-related business trip and caught his 40-year-old wife engaging in sexual intercourse with his 24-year-old travel partner. According to his travel partner, he ran upstairs and retrieved a silver handgun. He ran back down the stairs and, as the travel partner was putting his clothes back on, shot him once in the back. He collapsed and was rushed to the hospital while my friend fled the scene. His wife called the police and gave them his license plate number. He was caught by police entering the highway and charged with attempted murder, fleeing and eluding, aggravated battery, unlawful possession of a handgun, and possession of hollow point ammunition. This is in the state of New Jersey. No word on bail or bond. His wife has denied the cheating and stated he freaked out and got jealous because she was showing hospitality to his friend. Wow, really? No explanation as to exactly why he was over during that time. By the way, also a very completely different story from my best friend's version of events. This is the second time I've had a friend get charged in a domestic situation in recent months. Is there any way he can get out of this? I don't think so. Is there any self-defense clause he can use because, after all, a strange man was in his home, right? Not exactly. I'm looking for advice to give him, but I don't want to steer him wrong. He can make a few phone calls during a very short period in the day, but no visitations, which sucks. This is going to be a tough one for your friend. Wife still gets upset over the dumbest thing. Long story short, I've caught my wife cheating via Messenger for the last few years. The worst was last year when she broke her legs and I took care of her. Obviously, by accident that our son asked me to download a game on her phone last year. I decided to check her Messenger and boy, was my heart broken. I dig deeper and it went back to at least 4 years. I confronted her about it and I stupidly believed it was my fault. Fast forward to recently. Everything was pretty cool. Her and my son went back to her family's ranch in San Diego. I had a cool weekend and used my computer to log into Facebook. Somehow, it logged into hers. Surprise, I found her doing the same thing around her birthday. Full-on sex pics. I confronted her and she admitted her fault and apologized. Even did everything I said about her having to re-earn my trust. Anyhow, I brought up how I had been feeling still. She calls me, we video chat. I make a comment about how she looks like she's wearing makeup. And also how the light makes it look like she shaved her eyebrows. She immediately went into that fight mode. Red flags. I tried telling her I was just making an observation. But she immediately went into how she's been working hard at the ranch. No time to talk to anyone. I'm just demanding of her what to do. I won't let her shower. And I'm like, hold up. I never said that. My gut tells me she is still up to her no good shenanigans. Any help or advice is welcome. Well, if your gut is telling you that she's up to no good, then she probably is. Wife lies and inappropriate conversations continue. I'm 34. She's 32. Been together almost 11 years. Married almost 5. Long story short, she lives about an hour and a half away from work. She was having inappropriate, mildly conversations with her previous boss and spending time drinking with him. He randomly was in town and they went drinking. Ended up at her place. She called me crying saying he came on to her and was being creepy. She said she made him leave. This was May 2019. I believe this fully. I had no reason to mistrust at this time. After this, she began making major efforts to talk with him more and see him more. Listen guys, from my experience, if a woman thinks a man is creepy, she is not going to make any effort to be with him. She's going to do her best to stay away. She would travel down to my town, go drinking with him and supposedly others, and then come to my apartment to sleep before driving back home for work. Eventually, I picked up on what was happening and went through her phone. I found nothing overtly incriminating, but there was enough to know what was up. I'm unsure they had sex, but they were rather flirty and planning trips to see each other. Pretty sure I caught it before they had sex, but that's irrelevant. After this, she claimed no contact with him. She sent him a message in front of me saying the contact was inappropriate and that she values me and needs to put me first. I had cheated when we first started dating and she gave me a chance. So I felt that she deserved a chance. What kind of relationship is this? We started trying to focus on us more, traveled a bit, and then seemed to fall back into routine. From there, I told her I like to reconcile and make things work for the future. I told her then there is no room for more lies or more inappropriate discussions. She came clean at this point that she had another entanglement. This one I was unaware of and turned out to be highly sexually charged. I do not know if they had sex, but I believe they did. There were many discussions she disclosed about sexting, and specifically a lot revolves around him finishing inside her. She told me all of this, and also that she had purchased a remote vibrator for him to use while they were at work. Wow. She claimed she never used it because when they tried, the remote didn't have enough range from his office. I do not believe this. From here, I should have left. Yes, you should have. For some reason, I felt she'd been honest when I asked her to, and so I should try to see where we could go. This was in December of 2019. Since then, I've caught her talking with him and including sexual innuendos at least 3 or 4 times. She's refused to cut him out because she works with him and can't get another job right now because of the pandemic. She said she just keeps making mistakes and doesn't mean to. Bro, you need to cut her loose. I moved into a new place in June. She and her family came to help, and I later found out she was telling him she wanted to have fun physically and likes it hard via text while sitting having dinner with me and her family. I cannot seem to get myself to pull the trigger on divorce, and do not understand why. Well, from my experience and just my opinion, you need to cut this woman loose. Called the police on the ex-wife last night. My ex-wife cheated on me before our wedding 6 years ago. She decided to tell me about it after we got married, and she had continued cheating during that time. To be honest, I am not sure how many times she cheated. I caught her doing things so many times, having physical and emotional affairs with both men and women. The worst part was I kept trying to make it work. We had a daughter together during this time as well. I finally have learned to value myself and not accept cheating in a relationship. There were a multitude of reasons we didn't stay together, such as her being lazy, very unsupportive of my dreams as well. But her cheating drove a wedge between us that couldn't be fixed. Our divorce finalized June 9th, 2020, and I have been slowly getting all of our accounts split thanks to COVID-19 for making it take so long. During this time, I've been trying to be respectful and nice. However, over the last 2 days, I found some stuff that really made me mad and broke me down. This was yesterday. I was using the computer and found her search history from the day we filed. She was already living with her adulterer. The things that they looked up were mostly about me and very hurtful. I don't want to get into too much detail, but imagine your biggest flaws. It was a final straw. We had to meet later that day for the last account to be divided. And I couldn't even look at her. She kept probing and confronting me and told her I didn't want to talk about what was wrong. None of her business. She then proceeded to hit me with text after text saying how good of a person she is and how this really shows my character. I responded with, was your actions define your character, and anyone who describes themselves as you have is literally a narcissist. She proceeded to call me nonstop from multiple numbers, and I continuously hung up because I don't owe her anything anymore. And then she showed up at my house uninvited, screaming and knocking on all my windows and doors. She always wants to look for a fight, and I have no more fight left. I called the police, and they basically had to listen to both sides and all but shove her in her car to get her to leave. I heard her screaming to the cops, "I'm a good person. I grow things. I'm a hippie. He is just a coward." The cops proceeded to escort her to leave and told her if she came back that there wouldn't be any talking. This pissed her off royally. Then both cops told me I dodged a bullet by getting out of that relationship. Hearing them say that and watching her drive away was so much satisfaction. And even though she has put me through hell, that satisfaction of having some other normal human making me not feel crazy was humbling. That was so much better than stooping to her level and cheating on her, which I never did. Sometimes the high road can be just as satisfying and you don't have to be going or dragged through the mud. Well, I would say you definitely dodged a bullet. Cheating wife got full custody. Should I use this as an opportunity to start fresh? Age 45. I recently got divorced due to my wife's infidelity. But somehow the court granted her full custody even though I had a noticeably higher income and still made significant time to ensure that my kids, one is 14 and the other is 15, were happy and fed. Played video games with them, helped them study, worked on building a PC from scratch, go to sporting events, etc. Both flat out said they wanted to be with me rather than my now ex-wife. Never cheated or had any issues, but she was granted full custody. Since my now ex-wife has full custody of the kids, should I use this opportunity to start fresh? In other words, start a new family, pick up new hobbies, start a new business. Kids are 14 and 15, meaning that I only have to pay child support for a few years, and then I'm free. What's your suggestion? My personal opinion, don't neglect your kids. You don't need to have a relationship with the ex. Maybe somewhat of a relationship because of kids, but don't ever neglect your kids. It may come to bite you in the future if you do that. 27-year-old male caught his wife, 27, sexting 15 plus people with explicit images. Some married, also 3 of which go to our gym and 1 is a coach. I caught my 27-year-old wife sexting multiple people on Tumblr last night. We've been married almost 4 years and have been together 8. I've never known or expected her of cheating on me. She told me they were only talking and not exchanging pictures, but they had been talking for a couple of weeks. I was upset and went to bed. I was upset but did not think this was a marriage breaker since we have kids. Her stepkids, my children, and she said she was just wanting attention. I somewhat understood why someone might talk to a stranger, even possibly sext. I've never done this, but we have always been alright with us watching porn. The next day I start digging through all her internet and social media trails. Turns out she has been doing this with 10, 15 plus men. She said she has no idea how many. It just didn't feel that bad since it was just on the internet. And it turns out this has been going on for 4 months. And she was doing it with a coach at her gym and 2 other guys from her and my gym. And she was talking to them, messaging them up until yesterday. She was sending them explicit pictures, and they were sending them back. I saw the pictures. She swears she never did anything with them, and I messaged them, all of them, to try and get some kind of response from them about it. She said she'll even take a lie detector test, and that she never physically cheated on me. She's getting close. And she has offered to delete all social media and give me passwords to her personal stuff. She told me she will never see or talk to them again. She did all of this stuff at a time where she almost died from a blood clot. I was by her side constantly for 2 weeks, and she continued to sext after I constantly took care of her without one complaint. I was just thankful she was alive. I can't believe a word she says cause she seems to keep lying. But she could have told me everything by now. The only reason she stopped is because I caught her. I have no idea what to do right now. I've been thinking of divorce, but it would destroy our family. I have no one to talk to because I am embarrassed about getting completely cuckolded. And I don't want people to think badly of her, and we're getting around to the kids. Please give me some advice, guys who have been through something similar to this before. Well, there's an update to this. People are asking why she did this, and about 4 or 5 months ago she was unhappy with our marriage. Because I became complacent. She made me aware of it, and I have been doing my best to show her more attention. Not get angry with her anymore. She even told me I was so much better and there was no way I'm gonna leave. She said that this is when she started cheating with strangers online. She has been a great wife and friend and is very level-headed. She has raised my children for almost 8 years now. Their mother is pretty much out of the equation. She has been their mother, and my children would be beyond devastated about us divorcing. I really don't know how to get over it. I can't stop thinking about all those pictures and different guys seeing my wife in a way I'm only supposed to. How can I get over this? From my experience, only time can heal these wounds. It's gonna hurt and sting, but you'll get over it in time. I'm 34 and I cannot bring myself to trust my 31-year-old wife. Can't figure this out. It's probably just me. I'm probably being a jerk. I don't think it's my wife's style to talk to me a lot via text when she's going for work. Okay, no big deal, right? Everyone works, and some jobs really don't give you the room for that. And like, who cares if she doesn't text you? It doesn't mean anything, right? Except that she sends like a lot of text messages. I don't really know exactly to who though. But I check the phone bills and she texts like 3 to 5 times the amount that I do. Several thousands of messages. We have 2 kids. The kids are great. On the surface, everything is awesome for our family. Decent jobs, cool kids, everything we need. Am I inventing suspicion because I feel guilty and tempted to step out? Probably. I've developed some decent crushes over the years. Why? At least in part to the absences of my wife. Not just the long silences, but the abrupt random work hours. Long evenings and no real communication around them. If I pry, she gets angry and I can't really deal with her anger. She flares up and things get confusing really fast. So, I've kind of split my mind. I've gotten into trouble for hiding stuff I shouldn't have. I am always acting out of fear, hiding from my wife's anger. Sometimes I'm doing dumb shit I shouldn't. Sometimes it's innocent. But she doesn't trust me fully. I've never cheated on her physically. But I've had some close relationships with some women she didn't appreciate or fully knew about. And I still hold on to this instance where she had a sexual relationship with a dude when we were young. We've been together a long time, and this was a long time ago. But I feel like it validates that she has the capacity to do it again. Or to have been doing it. I guess we all do. I'm not in a healthy way about any of this. We have tried a few therapists. It's going not great and flares up and it's painful afterwards. Right now I just tell myself, fuck it. I don't concern myself with her hours or the concept of when she'll get home. I increasingly want to snoop, but it's so stressful. She takes this laptop to work I know she doesn't need. I feel like she's hiding something. Or am I super paranoid and guilty? Or all of the above? Or none? My opinion. If your gut is telling you something, then there's probably something not right. I'm Chijistego. But I don't know if I should restart with my now ex-girlfriend. She is 30 as well. After her being physically violent on several occasions. Confused because I've developed a strong bond with her kids. They're both 5 and 6. Please help. I want to start by saying I am absolutely in love with this woman, despite her negative behaviors. But I think that's clouding my judgment. And I could use some advice. I've known her for over 10 years. Called her Vivi. Lost touch with her. Reconnected. The timing was right and fell in love. It was great. Darn near a dream come true. It was romantic. Flirty. Passionate. And while that was happening, I developed a strong bond with her kids, who didn't have a strong father figure in their life. We dated for almost over a year and a half. It was crazy how good it all felt. She's the one for me. At least. I thought it was. I think we moved too fast. During that period, we both opened up and got comfortable. She had her insecurities. And so did I, doesn't everyone? But I also did start to notice her verbal abuse. It was light and I brushed it off. Arguments would get a little disrespectful, especially on her part. But I shrugged it off and didn't verbally attack her the same way. That's never cool to do. 5 months ago we agreed to moving in together. And that's when it got way worse on her end. Her verbal abuse got awful. Her guilt trips were used on me frequently. We argued several times a week. I got to a point where I would just say yes to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, the kids and I are doing amazing. They would darn near call me dad by accident. But I never forced them to say anything they didn't want to say. I'd go as far as to say I love these kids like my own. I can't blame her for me using alcohol to escape. But I started drinking more after arguments. And I would just leave her alone. I felt like I needed to just feel something else other than tension and anger. I hate arguing. It leads me to this now. She got crazy physically abusive on several occasions, leaving bruises and scratches on me after heated arguments at night. I never struck her back other than to get her away from me. And for those I feel god awful doing that to my partner. Cops were never called out of embarrassment. I couldn't speak to anyone. We agreed to figure it out together. Then the second time it happened. And I'm left with more bruises and scratches. And the recent one left more marks on me as well as damage to my personal property. She moved out and I've since fixed and repaired things that were broken. This happened within 4.5 months. What's broken now is she, and I can't sleep without seeing the kids again. I know I miss her and the kids. But I can't figure out if it's love or the abused mentality saying I want to go back. She's willing to work it out, take professional advice, and work on herself. And even taking steps to replace any money lost during our time together. So I can see she's trying. And the kids keep wanting to talk to me. But I can't get through a conversation without feeling depressed or afterwards breaking down in tears for them. I feel like I lost my family. I know she's a good one because I've seen it. But I think her domestic violence comes from her past as a child and her previous relationship. Let me give you some advice. You can't fix that. She needs to get help from someone else. Is it dumb to try again with her after all of this? Or am I just feeling the effects of an abused person in an abused relationship with domestic violence? Is this depression? I don't know anything anymore because it doesn't seem real. Advice? Work it out with professional help. Run for the hills. I would say run for the hills. Am I not supportive enough for her to help her through this? I just need help. Well, the only help you can give her is step back and let her get her own help. Professionally. First off, I want to say this is not a story about a cheating wife or cheating girlfriend. This is a crazy story about a guy's girlfriend getting into a fight with his brother over politics. Girlfriend and my brother got into a fist fight over a political argument, and now my family is demanding I break up with her. I introduced my girlfriend to my parents, siblings, and extended family on a family get-together a few days ago. This was the first time I had seen them since the start of the pandemic, and it started out really well with everyone getting along and having fun. That would change as more alcohol was consumed. My girlfriend and brother got into a heated political argument that suddenly escalated to violence, resulting in substantial injuries for both of them. Accounts of who threw the first punch differ, and I frankly don't care, as they both actively contributed to the fight and antagonized each other. The fight was eventually broken up, but my girlfriend had the clear advantage. My mom screamed at my girlfriend to leave, so we left. I love both my girlfriend and my brother, and I don't blame either one of them for the fight more than I blame the other. My girlfriend also doesn't seem to hold any grudges and is embarrassed by her behavior during the incident. My brother and parents, on the other hand, place 100% of the blame on my girlfriend and demand that I break up with her, or they will cut all ties with me. I will not do that, but I want to maintain my relationship with my family and somehow get them to accept my girlfriend and that she should not bear all blame for this incident. My brother is also demanding that my girlfriend pay for his alleged medical expenses and is threatening to report her to the police if she refuses. My experience of growing up in this town makes me think sexism in the local police department makes it unlikely that anything would come of that report, as they would almost certainly refuse to consider the possibility that a woman can assault a man. I have offered to pay off my brother, but my girlfriend refuses to let me do that and says that she will pay him if he can prove that the medical expenses are real. My girlfriend still has clearly visible injuries, but did not visit the hospital. I suggested that she go to get her injuries documented, but she doesn't want to do that. I just wish everyone could forget about this and move forward, but writing this makes me think my family is acting unreasonably, and perhaps I should just cut contact with them as they are threatening to do with me. Perhaps growing up with these people makes me blind to how ridiculous their behavior is. I don't know what I should do. I think everyone will need some time, or at least make an effort to try to get through it. 27-year-old male thinks his girlfriend, 25, is cheating on him with her manager. Hey y'all, my head is going crazy and I don't know what to think anymore, so I'm hoping someone can steer me in the right direction on if I'm overthinking things or if what I see is actually true. I've been dating my girlfriend now for 4 years and things are usually great. We rarely argue, enjoy doing the same things, have the same friends. About 2 months ago, I noticed she was texting her manager a bunch, which started to raise my suspicion, so I brought it up to her attention, and she brushed it off and said don't worry about it, and that her manager is an older guy who she's worked with since she was 17. All of her notifications are turned off on her phone, but I will often quickly glance at who she's texting while it's open. As of this week, the texting has yet to stop, and I finally went through her phone when she was in the shower. I found out they both stop and pick each other up breakfast in the mornings before work. One day she does, one day he does. She just bought a bike last month and he bought her a bicycle seat for it. He constantly asks her to hang out and walk the dogs together or if she wants to go to events with him. When she's not at work, he texts her saying work is so much better when she's there. And I noticed she texts this guy every single day, yet it was the only conversation in the text messages that had the shortest thread, meaning messages were deleted. 2 days ago, I sat her down and said I feel like she's cheating on me. I told her I went through her phone and noticed only his messages were deleted and nobody else's were. And her reasoning was that she needed space in her phone. Bullshit. I asked why they pick each other up breakfast when she's not even a breakfast person. And she said they do that to be nice, and that she always eats breakfast. I've seen her eat breakfast maybe 10 times. I asked why he bought the bicycle seat for her, and she said he had one laying around, so he offered it to her. I asked why the few times they've hung out, she always gets dressed up. But when I'm with her, she doesn't, and she said she feels comfortable wearing regular clothes when we go out alone. Interesting. After the first sit down, she said she went to work the next day and told her manager they can't text anymore because it's ruining her relationship. Again, I think bullshit. She would never have the balls to say that. She's kind of shy. I wasn't comfortable with her answer, so tonight I sat her down again and said I wasn't comfortable and needed more clarification. I asked her again why did she delete only his messages and nobody else's, and she said because she knew I didn't like him. Once she told me this answer, I said, okay, so why did you lie 2 days ago when I sat you down and asked you this question and answer with a different answer? And she said she doesn't remember what her answer was 2 days ago. I said, how can you not remember the truth? And she started getting mad and asked me what the benefit of staying in a relationship with me while cheating on me would be, and I said I'm not sure. She would have told me. There's so much I can type about this, but it would go on for days. Am I crazy for thinking she's cheating on me? That's a tough one, but if your gut is telling you something, then you might be onto something. If this story left you in shock, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life tales. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with all. Hey everyone, welcome back. I've got a jaw-dropping story to share with you today. My wife, 37, was a business partner with her father. They were both extremely wealthy because of this, which made me, 34, wealthy too. Since I married into her family, her father and I became very close, and he would show me a lot of business-related activities, so I understood them better. After 6 years of marriage, my wife started to distance herself from me. As part of her responsibilities, she would drive to clients' houses to deliver products to them and discuss upgrades. Obviously, being a well-spoken, friendly, and attractive woman helped business. My wife took this helping business notion a little too far one day. She started to seem particularly distant from me and excited in the weeks when she was scheduled to visit one particular client. I decided to confide in her dad about how I felt and what I noticed. He encouraged me to follow her discreetly to the client's house. I thought this was a sneaky answer from a normally straightforward guy, but I took his advice. I didn't know it was going to become the worst day of my life. I parked down the street from the house in question and watched her go in. The customer's name was Doug. According to our customer information, he wasn't married. Would that stop him from taking advantage of a married woman? Probably not. My mind was already picturing horrible scenarios, and it wasn't far off from what I was going to find. I walked up to the front door after 15 minutes. I thought about knocking, but decided not to, keeping in mind the word sneaky. I opened the front door slowly and peeked inside, but mostly listened. I could hear faint noises coming from the second floor. It didn't sound like any business conversation was taking place. I walked upstairs. My heart was racing, and I started recording on my phone. As I got closer to one particular door, I could hear them going at it. I opened the door and found my wife having sex with Doug. It was my worst nightmare coming true. My wife immediately turned to look at who was barging in on them and started screaming when she saw it was me. She tried to shield her body from the camera, but it was too late. It saw everything. She screamed for me to stop recording and let her get clothes on. I continued recording as I left Doug's house and got in my car. It recorded my sobs and angry words as I drove to my father-in-law's because I didn't know where else to go. When I got there, my father-in-law acted like a real dad to me. He listened intently as I told him what happened. He watched the video, but only to the point where he could hear moaning. He believed everything I told him, and better yet, he said he was on my side. 20 minutes later, my wife arrived there too. She walked straight into the kitchen, finding us at the dining room table. Before she even sat down, her father asked her how long she'd been seeing Doug. I looked at him in surprise, just like she did, because I wasn't expecting him to ask that question. I thought for sure she couldn't have done this more than once. She tried to say it was only this one time, but her dad told her he looked at the travel logs. He knew she was going to Doug's house way more often than necessary for the past 11 months. My jaw dropped, and I looked at her expectantly. She didn't know what to say. She tried to speak and protect her image, but it didn't make sense. At one point, it sounded like she was defending her actions by claiming it would help business. Her father offered no sympathy when he told her she was fired. She let out a weird noise of shock and started stammering. She wanted to keep her job, but what could she possibly say? I had her on video sleeping with Doug, and it was clear this wasn't the only time she did it. Besides the betrayal she dealt me, her father told her this was not the behavior he expected from his business partner or daughter. The real whammy that made my wife plead forgiveness was when he announced that he was going to disown her. It didn't matter how much she apologized or what she said, her father's mind was made up. She couldn't live in our marital home because her father's name was on it and he didn't want her there, and she couldn't live at his house either. She became homeless, living in her Audi. A nice car, but not a home. Once, when she called her dad crying, he told her she had 11 months, the duration of the affair, to stop and reconsider what she was doing. Because she didn't, he finds her despicable. He finished by saying I was lucky I found out the truth and got away from her. Her father gave me a choice. I could live in the marital home, and it would become mine, or I could move in with him. He owned a mansion that was about the size of 2 houses put together. The 2 halves were connected by one long hallway. I knew I would have privacy, but most of all, I considered him family and needed his emotional support. I decided I would continue to live in the marital home, but would still visit his place from time to time. He also offered me a partnership for the family business he runs, which I gladly accepted. I've been working with him for 7 years now since all this happened. Since then, I was also able to meet a new amazing woman who is now my wife. We have 2 kids together, and life couldn't be any better. As for my ex, her outlook on life isn't too great. I can tell because of her pessimistic posts on Facebook and the occasional bitter message she sends me. I just show them to my wife, and we have a good laugh about it. She may have some money still, but what she doesn't have is anyone around her that loves or cares for her as I did. Wow. Op. This is one crazy story. It sounds to me like your ex started to believe she had it all and wanted more. She probably started to think she deserved more attention and that there was no better way or time to get it than with a client. Obviously, this proved to be a very stupid and selfish decision that would cost her the dearest relationships in her life and her career. You noticed right away when her behavior changed, and you asked your father-in-law for advice. I think you made lots of wise decisions through this nerve-wracking experience. She was left with nothing and no one to care for her. Let this be a lesson to keep your ego under control and never assume for 1 second that sneaking around to achieve something is a good idea. I am so glad to hear that you have a new family and a close relationship with your adoptive father. Thank you for sharing your experience and positive outcome. I wish you the best of luck in life. Op. Now, let's get into today's second story. My wife, 35, and I, 38, have 2 sons. At the time this story begins, Eddie is already 11 years old, and his younger brother Teddy is 7. One seemingly ordinary morning, my wife rushed off to work early. I prepared breakfast for my boys, and we had a fun, light-hearted morning chat, like we always do before school. The car ride to school was a quiet, and it seemed like Eddie had something on his mind. I tried asking him if anything was wrong, but he said no. I dropped them off as usual and went to work. After work, I picked them up from school at the request of my wife. She texted me, saying she had to stay at work late for a meeting. I hated when this happened, but was used to it by now. She stayed late at meetings at least 4 times each month for the past 10 years. When we got home, I started cooking dinner for my sons while they sat at the table and did homework. Eddie still seemed like he had something on his mind, but he did his homework and asked me questions about it. We ate dinner together, and they told me about their day at school. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but this was the last time I would have a conversation and dinner with my sons before discovering life-changing news. We were about to clear the table when Eddie said he had something to tell me. His voice cracked, and he sounded like he was about to cry. Teddy looked uncomfortable and asked Eddie if he was sure he should tell me about it. I assured them they could tell me anything. Eddie proceeded to tell me that Mommy told them I wasn't their real dad, that a few times every month, Mom would take them to visit their real dad. My jaw dropped. I asked him who their real dad was and if I knew him. He said yes, I knew him. It was Uncle Kevin. I could not move for a few seconds. Both the boys asked if I was okay, if I was mad, and what I was going to do. When I snapped out of it, I told them both that I loved them. I told them that according to me, I would always be their dad. They were happy with that and helped me clean up dinner. They went off to play, and I contemplated what I was going to do. My own brother fathered my children. How could this have happened? I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't prove it. I told the boys to wait until a specific day to tell Mommy that they told me I wasn't their daddy. They agreed and seemed to forget about it. I laid on the couch watching the boys play until my wife got home. As soon as she did, I told her I wasn't feeling well and had to go to sleep. I laid in bed awake until my wife put the boys to bed. When she got in bed with me, she tried to see if I was sleeping, and I pretended to be. When she was asleep, I unlocked her phone. My heart was racing because I never checked her phone before, and I kept thinking she was going to wake up. I found a messaging app tucked into the last page of an app folder called Utilities. It was like she didn't want anyone to find it on her phone. One of her messaging conversations was with Kevin. It was like reading an everyday conversation between a romantic couple talking about their day, when they were going to meet next, how the boys were, and stuff like that. Mixed into that were messages like, I love you. I consider you to be my husband. The children are lucky to know their real father. I will marry you when the time is right. And then there were sexual messages. Apparently, whenever my wife and brother wanted to have sex, my wife would simply tell me that she had to work late. That was all the proof I needed. Right here, under my nose on her phone. I felt like the biggest idiot in the world for believing my wife and family were perfect and honorable. I took screenshots of their conversations and sent it to myself. Revenge had no choice but to be sweet. The next day, I hired a PI and a lawyer. I already had some proof, but it had to be undeniable. The lawyer informed me that I could receive alimony from my ex, keep my house, and sue my brother for sleeping with my wife and ruining our marriage. A DNA test was done, quickly, I might add, on the boys, and it was determined that the DNA was slightly off from mine. A more exact match was likely to be found in my brother's DNA. Over the next month, a PI followed my wife. It was hard for me to behave normally during this time, but it helped to pretend that my son never told me the secret. At the end of the month, the PI sent me all he captured. There were 42 pictures of my wife, children, and brother. They were all behaving like a family at the park, at his house, and out to dinner. It was the weirdest, most heartbreaking thing to see. There were also pictures of my wife and brother through his bedroom window. The PI must have climbed a tree, and that's what I call dedication. The pictures were explicit. Now that I had all the proof I needed, it was time for my son to tell his mom that I knew the truth. I reminded him to tell her and Uncle Kevin next time they had a visit. 4 days later, my wife left with the kids under the pretext that they were going to visit my wife's mom. I've always hated her, but only because she always hated me. She probably wouldn't ever accept that her daughter conceived children with her husband's brother and passed them off as his own. They were gone for 30 minutes before they returned home. It was just enough time for them to arrive at Kevin's, only for Eddie to tell them that I knew the truth and race back home. It was too late though. I already changed the locks and put a note on the front door. It read, It's time for the three of you to move in with Kevin. Divorce papers and court summons will be arriving there for mommy and daddy. My wife banged on the door and cried. It bothered me that it upset her so much. She chose my brother over me by sleeping with him, having his children, and maintaining a secret relationship with him for a very long time. Not only that, but she coached the boys not to tell me anything about it. Even though she sat by the front door crying for an absurdly long time, I had no desire to go out there and discuss anything with her. Eventually, Kevin arrived to pick them all up. They lived with him through the divorce proceedings and court hearings. I kept my house and won alimony payments from my wife. I didn't have to pay child support, and I won in court against my brother. He was ordered to pay me a very large sum of money for sleeping with my wife and ruining our marriage. After I became a wealthy bachelor, my ex's relationship with Kevin fell apart. It must have been different living together with the boys 24/7. The stress of going to court and losing a lot of money probably didn't help anything either. After just 1 year, my ex moved out of Kevin's house and in her mom's house. Throughout that year, and even afterward, my ex would text me at least once a day asking how I was or telling me she was sorry. I still got to visit with the boys, and I know they appreciated it, but it was nothing compared to how we used to be together. My ex could see the difference, and she blamed herself for it, rightly so. It's been 2 years since all of this happened, and the boys show resentment towards their mother for changing who their dad is. She can hardly stand the guilt, but what choice does she have? She continues raising them at her mom's house and has yet to return to the dating scene. My brother doesn't speak to me, but I know he regrets what he's done because my dad told me so. I just started dating another woman, and I have a good feeling about her. She has one daughter and wants to have more children. She's compassionate, kind, and honest. I know that even if she doesn't become my wife, there is always hope for a bright future. Wow, Opie, I am so sorry your wife did this to you. She knowingly went behind your back early on in marriage and had your brother's children. This isn't a story you hear every day, but unfortunately, it does happen. I'm glad to hear you have your dad to talk to, but for the most part, it seems you made smart decisions on your own. You took the time to figure out how to proceed. The things you set into motion helped you to make the cleanest break. It's lucky your wife didn't try to frame you for anything or plot to kill you. This actually happens in the world today. I'm so sorry about what happened to you and hope you are able to heal from this situation. If this story left you speechless, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more shocking tales. Hello everyone, Paul here. I never imagined I'd be sharing my story like this, but sometimes life throws you a curveball. What you're about to hear is the most shocking experience of my life and how I managed to rebuild from the ground up. My name is Paul, a proud, honest blue-collar guy, clocking in at 52 years old, grew up with the belief that hard work and dedication were the keystones to a good, comfortable life. For the better part of my life, that belief held water. I spent years building up a successful car repair business right in the heart of Georgia, and I reckon I did well for myself. Owned a neat house in Fulton County, had a reliable circle of buddies. And at the end of the day, there was always a cold beer waiting in my fridge. Couldn't really ask for more. Then there's my wife, Shannon. We'd always joke how she was the brains and I was a brawn of our little duo. She graduated from the University of Georgia with a Bachelor of Science degree, a smart cookie. That one, her passion for caring for others led her to become a nurse practitioner. And she's been serving at a nearby hospital ever since. Watching her dedication and commitment to her work was something that I admired deeply. She'd come home exhausted yet there was always a satisfaction in her eyes. The kind you get when you know you've made a difference. We were young and full of dreams. When we said our I do's 22 years ago, those first years, there was something filled with laughter, plans for the future. And they loved that felt as comfortable as an old one in pair of boots. We were joined at the hip, almost two kids against the world. I'd fix cars during the day. She'd heal folks. And at the end of the day, we'd come home to each other. Over the years, we built a stable and comfortable life, a life that I was damn proud of. She was my rock, and I like to believe I was hers. We were more than just a couple. We were a team. Well, as I would soon find out, our team was about to be dismantled. Our daily grind was like clockwork, a rhythm we fell into over the years. My day started early with the smell of engine oil and the sound of turning gears. I had my loyal crew at the shop, and together we breathed life into old jalopies and finicky luxury cars alike. Shannon's work started a bit later, but lasted long into the night, filled with the hum of hospital corridors and a gratitude of patients she aided. Despite the long hours, she had a kind of fire in her that kept her going. We had our differences, but we found common ground and hobbies. We both enjoyed gardening, hiking, and the occasional cooking battle in our humble kitchen. Our circle of friends was small, but tight-knit, filled with folks from our community, fellow mechanics, hospital workers, and some old pals from college. Both of us knew that working hard was a means to an end. We were dreaming of a comfortable retirement where the days were long and the worries were few. We'd fantasize about finally getting that RV and setting off on a cross-country trip, just the two of us exploring every nook and cranny of this beautiful country. To make that dream a reality, we were diligent about contributing to our 401k plans. Every month, a chunk of our earnings would go towards it. I would put a chunk in mine, and she would put a chunk of money in her 401k. We were practical folks, and we knew that planning for the future was just as important as living in the present. Well, I had no idea that 401k was about to become a thorn in my side, and the future we were so eagerly planning was going to look vastly different than we imagined. I'll never forget that day as I was manning the booth for my repair shop. I saw one of Shannon's coworkers, Sue, walking over. She had a friendly face, always had a kind word or a funny anecdote from the hospital to share. That day she seemed a bit off, but I brushed it off as exhaustion from the long hospital shifts. We chatted about this and that, the weather, the fare, the latest hospital gossip. Then, out of the blue, Sue mentioned something that made my heart rate rise instantly. She casually brought up a certain someone my wife had met at a conference, how they seemed to hit it off, how Shannon had been glowing since then. She must have seen the confusion on my face, quickly backpedaling, saying it was probably nothing, just a harmless crush, but I couldn't shake off what she said. The seed of doubt had been planted, and like a bad weed, it was growing fast. Was my wife, Shannon, involved with someone else? Disbelief, confusion, and a kind of gut-wrenching turmoil started brewing inside me. The woman I spent half my life with, who I trusted, was now a question mark. It was like I was staring at a jigsaw puzzle with the piece missing. I started second-guessing everything she did, her late-night shifts, the unexplained absences, her newfound secrecy around her phone, but darn it, I didn't want to believe it. Not Shannon, not my wife, but this feeling wouldn't let me be. It was eating me up from the inside. Finally, I decided to confront her. On this day, we were in our backyard, tending to our rose bushes. As the nervousness set in, I asked her straight out about the guy from the conference. She was like, "What are you talking about?" I then told her, "Your coworker told me that you were a little too close with this person you were talking to at the conference, and you might have a crush on him." She got defensive right away and said she was lying. She has never gotten that angry about anything. After that, it was pure silence. I didn't stay in the garden with her. I left and didn't tell her where I was going. I drove around for a while, trying to gather my thoughts to figure out what was going on. Why would Sue come up to me and tell me that? But my wife said she was lying. After about an hour or so, I went back home and my wife was sitting on the couch on her phone. She didn't even greet me, which was really strange. Didn't even ask where I had gone. Was I all right? Nothing. The next morning, I went to my shop and talked to one of the managers that worked for me. He was a long-time employee and was about the same age as me. I opened up to him and told him how my wife reacted to her coworker's remark about her getting too close to a guy at a conference. He said that might be a red flag. He said most of the time, people who don't have anything to hide will usually try to find out why she said that, and being defensive right away isn't a good sign. The rest of my workday was horrible after he said that. I couldn't get it out of my mind, but I wasn't going to say anything else to my wife about it, but I wasn't done. I was going to be more observant to see if there was any truth to this. And I wasn't going to ask Sue again. Over the next few weeks, my wife's behavior started to shift a little bit. I didn't confront her about it. Ever since I asked her about the guy she met at the conference, she's been a tad bit distant. It's been 3 weeks since that day, and we haven't been intimate. The hobbies we shared came to a screeching halt. Fast forward 2 days, and I go to open the shop one morning, and a woman greets me with an envelope and screams at me and tells me, "Tell your wife to stay the hell away from my husband." Man, you should have seen my face. I go in, I open the envelope immediately, and boom, photos of my wife kissing another man, being intimate with this man in someone's house, pictures of my wife in her uniform, sitting with this man at a park. Also inside was a phone number. I called it. It was a woman who just left. She apologized for screaming at me. She said she was angry at her husband. She informed me she hired a private investigator to follow her husband. They have 3 kids. She said, "I thought you should know what your wife was doing, man." I was devastated, angry, and heartbroken at the same time. My longtime employee came in about 20 minutes later, and I asked him to cover the shop for me today. And I left. I went home. My wife wasn't home. I made copies of everything that woman gave me. Once that was done, I packed a few bags and headed to the rental property my brother owns. Once I got settled in, I went to see a divorce lawyer. I didn't waste any time. I handed over the evidence I had and told the divorce attorney to file for divorce based on infidelity. And I told him I am going after everything. I could alimony her 401k. Anything I could get alimony was a stretch. I believe she made almost $120,000 per year as a senior nurse practitioner. I didn't make that. Although I had my own business, my salary wasn't that high. Weeks went by with very little communication from my wife. But when she received those divorce papers, she was a totally different person, calling me names, telling me I didn't measure up anymore. A month and a half had passed by before the divorce hearing. And she was a hoot. Let me tell you, screaming at me in the courtroom, the bailiff had to calm her down. Well, the divorce didn't go her way. I ended up getting alimony in the amount of $900 per month for 9 years. And lo and behold, I took half of her 401k in the amount of $100,000. My salary was $60,000 per year, and she made double that. I will also get half of the equity of the house we own when it's sold. And I was lucky enough to keep the rental only because it was in a trust that my brother controlled. My ex-wife's AP got hammered in his divorce. As I was told, he had to pay $4,000 per month in alimony for 11 years. He lost the house, and she gets part of his retirement. They were married for 24 years, but they have been together for 28 years. I would have gotten more from my ex-wife's 401k, but she took some of the money out, which was stupid. You never take out money from your 401k early. You will get hit with a 10% early withdrawal penalty and subject to tax by the IRS. About 9 months after the divorce, we ended up selling the house, and I got another $157,000. I am a little overweight, but I have started working out again and taking it one day at a time. My friends have been trying to set me up with dates. I am just not ready for that yet. Anyway, that's my story. I have been wanting to send my story to Tony for a while now. I just finally gotten around to it. If you found this story as unbelievable as I did living it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's support each other through life's toughest moments.
Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Here is another story that was sent by a listener. This happened to him about 2 years ago, as he says, "Let's go. I am 51 and my wife is 50. I am a foreman for a large construction company here in North Carolina. And my wife works as a manager for a large clothing store in the mall. I was married for 19 years just 2 years ago. My marriage ended and I walked in on my wife with someone I never knew existed. She never displayed any red flags. I had access to her phone. I had access to her computer and she had access to mine. When she did girls' night, and yes, she did girls' night, but she always had her phone location turned on and always came home at a reasonable hour. I wasn't really big into social media, but she was, and used it mostly to advertise discounts at a store. We don't have any kids together, but I have one son from a previous marriage. My first marriage ended because my ex-wife was an undercover meth head, but I quickly recovered from that marriage and moved on with my life. And then I met my current wife at another store she was managing at that time. I struck up a conversation with her. And from then on, we started dating right away. And we've been together ever since. About 2 years ago, I came home from work and my wife was already home, which was surprising because I usually got home before she did. But the strange part was she was on the computer. And when I walked through the front door, she quickly closed her PC. Now in the whole time we have been together, she has never done that, never. But I didn't dwell on it. I just thought it was odd. Fast forward 2 weeks, my wife calls me at work to tell me she is going out with a couple of her girlfriends after work. She has always done this. And I told her I would just see her at home later. She didn't get home until almost 3 a.m. And I let her have it. I was so angry we got into a huge argument and my angry feelings toward her lingered well into the next day. She apologized later and I accepted her apology and didn't think anything else of it. A few weeks later, I was at home just relaxing from work. When my wife comes walking through the door, telling me she had a bad day at work, she had to fire an employee, which upset her. I was sympathetic and just tried to listen as to why she told me the reason she had to fire one of her employees. This woman was actually one of her assistant managers and she had to fill this job rather quickly. Until then, she had to take on her job and told me some days will be way longer than others, to which I told her I understood. Fast forward a couple of weeks and my wife's schedule has changed drastically. She is getting home later from work and seems to be a little stressed when she comes home. I got off work one day a little early and went to the mall where my wife's store is. But by chance, I run into the young woman my wife supposedly fired. I have seen her face in the store at times and made small talk when I was visiting my wife. We started chatting and she tells me that she enjoyed working for my wife, but my wife didn't want to pay her more money. She was essentially doing my wife's job. She told me on a few occasions, my wife left work early to go hang out with her girlfriends. So she gave her a 2-week notice, but then she started giving me certain time frames of when my wife left early to go hang out with her girlfriends. Turns out my wife lied to me each time. Basically, her manager was covering for her. I was surprised she was telling me this, maybe because she had some type of vendetta against my wife, but it caught my attention. After our conversation, I went to my wife's store and didn't tell her the conversation I had with their former employee just around the corner. After hanging out with my wife a bit, I drove home only to be thinking about what this woman told me about my wife leaving her store early and being dishonest about it. Lots of things were going through my mind. Why would she be dishonest like that? Well, when she got home that evening, we had a long sort of heated discussion about those time frames. She basically came back with she didn't want to be out too late, so she had her employee cover for her and she was drunk a few times. That night led to a dead bedroom. As a matter of fact, that dead bedroom lasted a few weeks before I really started to notice a huge shift in my wife's behavior. My wife started going to the gym all of a sudden and she didn't invite me. And I only found out that she had a gym membership because she left work early and one of her employees said that's where she went. It was beginning to feel like my wife was becoming a totally different person. She never kept anything from me, never. Fast forward a few hours, my wife came home from the gym, but she wasn't wearing gym clothes. And I didn't say anything to her about me visiting her store, and me knowing about her new secret gym membership. My wife gets home and doesn't say one word to me, didn't even ask me how my day was, nothing. She just goes to the shower and I am left in the living room, not really sure what is going on. She didn't come back out of the bedroom, but her phone was on the kitchen counter. I picked it up and it immediately asked me for a password. That's when I knew something was up. The fact that she is leaving work early, a sudden gym membership and a password on her phone. She's never had a password on her phone. Fast forward a week and my boss tells me that I need to go to Charlotte for a bit on an upcoming project in that city. He said he will pay me for the travel time, etc. So before I tell my wife, I asked my neighbor, who is an older guy who is retired from General Motors, to keep an eye on the place for a couple of days. He agreed, and for someone in his 70s, he knows his tech. So he gave me some recommendations on some indoor cameras and where to put them. I have always wanted cameras but never got around to installing them. But this was a perfect opportunity to install some since I would be gone for a few days and my wife will be home by herself. Well, that night I told her I will be leaving for a few days. It was a Wednesday night and I would be back Saturday for sure. Then she says to me, "Why are you leaving to go bid on a job?" I said, "My boss doesn't have anybody else to do it besides him, but he is already bidding on another job." Mid-morning I leave for Charlotte. My wife had already left for work, and it takes me about 3 hours to get to Charlotte. When I got there, went to the hotel, checked in and sent my wife a text to let her know I made it there. It was strange. She was giving me a play-by-play of her every move, but she didn't know I had cameras outside and inside, including the bedroom. My wife and I texted each other for most of the night and even FaceTimed each other. The cameras didn't show anything, but she was on her phone quite a bit and moving around the house, but nothing suspicious. At 11 a.m., I get an emergency phone call from my boss. He needed me back because another one of the workers had an emergency at home. So I told him I could be back as early as this evening. I did not tell my wife I was coming back a day early. I would be getting back early enough to take her out to a nice restaurant. So I head back home, and when I get there it's just getting dark. My neighbor's car is gone. His house is dark, but I can see from a distance. There is a car in my driveway parked behind my wife's car. I stopped. I didn't pull all the way up. I parked a few hundred yards away from the house. I went to the side door of the garage, used my key and opened the door gently. And when I went into the garage, there it was, a man's voice in my house laughing with my wife. I waited, grabbed the axe that was right next to the door. There were a few minutes of silence. Then I hear them walk upstairs to the bedroom. When I heard them make it to the bedroom, I opened the door to the inside of the house, take off my shoes and walk up the stairs. My heart is pounding, and all of a sudden they both start making sounds. The door to the bedroom is open. I peeked my head around and there they were having sex. I stood there for a good 60 seconds before the guy noticed I was there. He says, "Oh shit." My wife screams. I am not a small guy. I am 6 feet 2 inches, 250 pounds and a little overweight. This guy wasn't going anywhere, at least at the moment he wasn't. My wife is saying, "Please, please." At that moment I raised the axe I have in my hand and told them both, "Get the fuck out." When they left, I just sat on the couch, just in a daze of what happened. Once I was able to calm down, my wife starts blowing up my phone and I blocked her. I called my brother and told him what happened. He was at my place within 30 minutes. My brother said to me, "Let's get you out of here." I packed a few things and went to stay at my brother's place. Then my wife started calling my brother, but he ignored her calls. The next morning I go to work and spill my guts to my boss. He was floored and told me if I can't work, he would understand. I told him I could work, but would need some time to take care of this mess legally. Fast forward a week, I gathered the footage from the cameras, hired an attorney and my wife was served at the house. I have not seen her since that night. 2 months later, at the divorce hearing, my wife had an attorney and their attorney was trying to get alimony out of me, as well as trying to get the house to herself. But the judge said that based on the evidence in front of her, she forfeited that with her infidelity. The judge called it marital misconduct. I have never even heard of it. After everything was said and done, she did not get any alimony. She didn't get any of my retirement, but she will get half of the assets we own in the house and about 20% of the equity in the house when it's sold. Unfortunately, the judge allowed her to stay in the house. I told the judge I didn't want to stay there. I had a place to go. About 4 months later, the house was sold. I took my material belongings and she took hers. I have never seen or heard from my ex-wife since the divorce hearing. My brother said he was at the mall one day, walked by her store and my ex-wife was talking to a customer. She sent me a letter one day to my brother's place. He called me and told me I told him to tear it up and throw it in the trash. It's been 2 years since that happened and I am still torn up about it. I am surprised I let that guy walk out, but I just couldn't do it. If this story left you in shock, make sure to like, comment and subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life tales. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with all.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My wife and I knew each other our entire lives before we got married. It was a really sweet story of childhood friends who fell in love young and got married. When we started dating, we were each other's first kiss. She was the only woman that I had ever been with, and I thought the same with her. We were neighbors growing up, and we would often play together as children. I knew her family, and she knew mine. Everybody would always joke with us about how they knew we would be together forever. After we both graduated college, we got married, and we started planning our future. We ended up buying a house for my uncle in our hometown so we could be close to our families. After a couple of years, we decided to start building a family together. We have 2 children, twins, and our life was perfect. Out of the blue, one evening while we were watching a television show, my wife asked me if I regretted never being with another woman. I immediately told her that I didn't. I'll admit that there have been other women I've been attracted to. Sleeping with them had never crossed my mind though. I loved my wife very much, and she was the only one for me. I asked her about why she brought that up, and she told me that she had just been thinking about it. She explained that she was worried that I would get bored with her. She brushed it off then, and we continued watching our show. When my wife was a teenager, her aunt married a new man. I remember it being a big deal at the time because her aunt went through a very bitter divorce and was staying at my wife's family home for quite some time. When she married the man, she ended up moving out. The man that she married had 2 children of his own around our age, so it felt like we had 2 new friends in the neighborhood. Both were boys, and they were always kind of rowdy. One of them, let's call him Paul, has always been a bit of a problem child. Paul would have wild parties. He would get in trouble, and he slept around quite a bit. Despite all of that, he was always very fun to be around. He was the life of the party. In his adult years, he's calmed down quite a bit. He had a good job, and he was on the straight and narrow. His only major issue was his inability to remain in relationships. They always seemed to fail before they got too serious, and Paul would get pretty beat up about it. Paul was dating a girl that he really liked, and she ended up breaking up with him. He was hurt, so he reached out to my wife and me to talk. My wife, being the sensitive and caring woman that she was, went over to his house to make him dinner and listen to him. I didn't go because I didn't want to overwhelm him. I never expected that anything would happen between them. She came home later that night, and when I asked her about what happened, she was very evasive with her answers. She didn't seem to want to tell me about what Paul said to her. I thought it was fishy at the time, but again, I never thought she was doing anything inappropriate with him. Looking back, a lot of how she was acting after that night seemed like she felt guilty. She was being very generous to me with a lot of things. She kept cooking my favorite meals. She surprised me with small gifts, and she complimented me all the time. She was nice, but it was a little over the top. It felt almost like a child who broke something they shouldn't have been playing with, trying to make up for it. About a week after the night she visited Paul, she went back. She told me she was going to bring him some food just to make sure he was getting something healthy to eat. I offered to come along so I could check in on him, but my wife told me that it would be better if it was just her. Just assumed that it had something to do with him being in an emotional state. I stayed back and put the kids to bed while she went to visit Paul. She came back a few hours later and told me that they had a long talk about everything. She didn't give me any details about what he said. She started to visit Paul by herself a lot more frequently over the next few weeks. As I said before, Paul dated a lot of women and broke up with a lot of women. I had never seen him so distraught over a breakup before. The more time my wife was spending with him, the less it was making sense. She came home one night and I asked her about what was really going on with Paul. I didn't think that she was sleeping with him, but I thought something else was happening. It was just also out of the ordinary. She stuck to her story about Paul being very emotional after the breakup. I offered to maybe go talk to him and give him some advice, but she told me that it probably wouldn't be much help. Regardless of what she said, I was worried about him. He was my family and my friend, and I wanted him to be okay. Over my lunch break at work the following day, I stopped by his house to check on him. At the time this was happening, my wife wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom and the kids were in school, so she had all day to do whatever she wanted to do. Her car was in the driveway when I arrived. She didn't tell me she was going to visit Paul that afternoon, so I was a little surprised. I approached the door ready to ring the bell and pop in to see what was going on. Before I even touched it, I could hear noises right on the other side of the door. It sounded like they were having sex and my wife was being pinned up against the door. I was frozen in place. That was absolutely the last thing I expected to see. I couldn't even believe it. I don't know why I did it, but I ended up calling my wife on the other side of the door. I heard her phone go off and I heard them both freeze for a moment while she looked at it and rejected the call. I heard some muffled conversation as Paul asked her if she was okay. My wife told him that it was just a little weird that I was calling in the middle of the day and that worried her. Paul made a joke about having something that could make her forget all about that. They started kissing again and they walked off somewhere else in the house. I stood outside for a few minutes contemplating what I wanted to do. I just caught my wife having sex with Paul. Paul was her cousin, not related by blood, but he was still very much a part of the family. It took me a few minutes before I put everything together. I knew right away that it was over between her and me. Our entire relationship, all of the years we knew each other, was going to be flushed down the toilet. I was going to get proof of what happened before doing so. I knew Paul had a spare key hidden under a rock by his house, so I grabbed it and let myself in. I could hear the noises coming from the bedroom and I made my way there. The door was wide open and I pulled my phone out to take a quick video of both of them. After about 30 seconds passed, I knocked on the door and both of them turned around to look at me. They tried to cover themselves up and explain what was happening. The absolute funniest part of this was my wife chasing me out of the house telling me she was only sleeping with him to help get his mind off the other woman. As if that made it okay. I was flabbergasted. I called off work for the rest of the day and sat in my car while I looked for a good divorce attorney online. I reached out to one and set up a meeting. While I waited for that, I went home and packed a bag to go stay at my parents' house while everything was figured out. I grabbed the kids from school and brought them along with me. My wife was blowing up my phone, but all I did was text her and let her know that I had the kids and they were safe, but I needed time away from her. The next time I saw her, I was serving her with papers. That just wasn't enough for me, though. She cheated on me with her own cousin, destroying our family. I wanted to get back at her for what she did. I thought about it quite a bit, and I realized that not many people would be understanding of their relationship. Again, he wasn't a blood relative, but he was still family. I crafted a heartfelt Facebook post explaining to everybody that after years of being together, my wife and I were divorcing. I explained what happened, sparing very little detail, I might add. A ton of family members commended, saying that what she did was wrong, and they were telling me how sour they were for what I went through. Later that same day, my wife and Paul both reached out to me and asked me to take the post down because they were getting very hateful messages from family and friends alike. I told them that I didn't have to take it down and I didn't plan on it. Both my wife and her cousin were pretty much barred from every family function that we had. They lost a ton of friends, and pretty much everybody in our family shamed them for what they did. We lived in a small community and word travels fast, so when pretty much everybody in town heard that Paul slept with his cousin, it was a little more difficult for him to find new girlfriends. Both of them were humiliated by the post. My wife and I are divorced now, and I was awarded the house and all of our assets because I purchased them all. She has received no spousal support from me, and until she gets a job, I have primary custody of the kids. Opie, I can't believe you had to go through something like this. You trusted your wife with her kind heart to go and help her cousin through a rough time. It honestly sounds like it started that very first night she went over to his house. It definitely seems like she felt guilty about what she did initially, but when you didn't notice right away, she thought she was free to continue. Cheating in general is already bad enough, but cheating with your cousin is disgusting. You made it clear in the post that they weren't blood related, but I don't think that matters. They practically grew up together, and it seems like they were close as a family before that. I think sharing what they did with the rest of the family was the right thing to do. The fact that the rest of the town shamed them for their actions was just a bonus to that. What they did was wrong from several different areas, and they should have been ashamed of it. I'm glad you were treated fairly during the divorce and your children are with a parent that can support them. Divorce is hard on families, and I wish you guys nothing but the best moving forward. Now, let's move on to our next story for today. My girlfriend and I were together for almost 3 years. I met her at work and I had a huge crush on her before I asked her out. When I finally got the courage to do it, she told me she'd been waiting for me to ask her on a date. Everyone in the office thought we were the cutest couple. I thought so too. She was by far the best looking woman I had dated up to that point. That's not saying other women I've dated weren't attractive. They were. But my girlfriend looked like she could be a model. She was absolutely stunning. Our company ended up going bankrupt, and there were mass layoffs throughout. Both my girlfriend and I were laid off. I found another job pretty quickly. It wasn't anywhere near as good as my old one, but there was room for growth, and it gave me health insurance. My girlfriend, on the other hand, was having a more difficult time. She didn't want to settle for something. She worked hard to get where she did in our company, and she felt like she deserved more. I started to notice, when we would hang out, that she had a lot of new things around her apartment. She had new clothes and shoes. She was buying expensive makeup and fancy home goods. She wasn't living like somebody who had lost their job, and I knew unemployment wasn't giving her that much either. I casually asked her about it, questioning how she was able to afford the lifestyle she was living. She told me that she had started freelancing online to make some extra income. I had no reason to doubt that was the case. I knew some people made lucrative careers out of freelancing, so it seemed plausible. About 2 years into our relationship, I asked her if we could move in together. My lease was set to be renewed in a couple of months, and I thought it was a good time for us to take that next step. especially considering it would make both of our bills so much more affordable. She agreed, and I moved in a couple of months later. After we had the original conversation about her freelancing, I never thought much more about it, but the first few weeks of living together, I noticed that she didn't do a lot of work. She always seemed to be hanging out in the bedroom or watching television. She was on her phone a lot, but I didn't think it was for work. I asked her about it again, not trying to be rude, but more so just questioning what it was exactly she did and how often she did it. She just told me that she got most of her work done early in the mornings and had the rest of the time free. One night she and I were getting intimate, and she asked me if we could film it. My first instinct was that it was kind of hot, but I didn't want to be on camera. If the video of us ever got out for any reason, then my employers might see it, and it could be difficult for me to get a job and things like that. She ended up convincing me to do it by promising that my face or any other identifying parts of my body wouldn't be in the video. She seemed to want us, so eventually I agreed. We did our thing and recorded it. It wasn't something I had an interest in ever doing again. Everything was normal for the next few months. We had gotten into a solid routine with each other, and there wasn't anything major going on. She came to me and told me about a conference for freelancers that she was interested in attending. There were going to be a lot of people in the industry that she could network with to get some new clients. I thought it was a great idea. She had already made a pretty good living for herself through her work, and the ability to expand that business was promising. She bought her ticket and went on her way when the time came. It was a weekend-long conference, so I was alone in the apartment for about 3 days. One night, I was feeling particularly alone. I remembered that she recorded us a few months prior, so I grabbed her camera to look for that footage. I hooked the camera up to my computer and opened the video folder to grab the video and put the camera back. I saw that there were hundreds of other videos on the camera. I was curious, so I clicked on one. It was a video of her dancing in a room and stripping. There were countless other videos of her all over the apartment. All of the videos were extremely sexual. I was really curious about why she had them. I had a suspicion about it right away, but I needed some confirmation. I grabbed her laptop and looked through it to confirm if she was camming or not. She had a bookmark folder in her browser called Work, and when I clicked on it, there were several camgirl websites linked. Of course, her information was saved. I could log in and see everything she was posting and everything she was saying with all of her fans. Her account was relatively new, it seemed, but she had some very dedicated followers. There were dozens of direct messages that hadn't been read yet from some of her fans. They were saying very obscene things to her and commenting on her body and things like that. She was role-playing with them to get tips. One of the videos on her page caught my eye because it was the video she had taken with me. I was immediately panicked knowing that there was a video of me on the internet. There were a ton of comments on the video where the men said things like, "I wish that was me." Not long after that video was posted, she posted something about a raffle she was holding for a lucky fan to be able to sleep with her. I felt like I was going to throw up when I read that. I was sick to my stomach. Her job as a freelancer was a lie. She uploaded the video that we had taken together without my consent, and now she was likely on her way to sleep with some random man from the internet. I looked through everything I could on the accounts, and I figured out that she basically held a raffle where men could buy tickets to have a chance to sleep with her. She had about 100 entrants in this raffle. In her emails, I was able to confirm that she was in fact on her way to sleep with the fan that won the raffle. She was going to film it to post online. My girlfriend called me while I was looking at her accounts, and I answered. I was in shock, so I didn't know what to say to her. She asked me if she left her laptop behind. She was worried she lost it on the flight. I told her that it was there. Had she not forgotten it, I might not have known about what happened. It was almost like fate wanted me to figure out what was going on. I knew that I wasn't going to be with her after this. I'm a pretty liberal person, and if she had told me that she had this camming site, I might have understood. I would never have been happy with it, but it would have been something we could have talked about. But she posted a video of me on it, and she was going to cheat on me with a man who won a raffle to sleep with her. There was no way in hell I was going to continue this relationship with her. I called one of my buddies and briefly explained what was going on and told him that I needed a place to crash for a few days. I got as much of my stuff out of the apartment as I could. I slept on it overnight thinking about what I was going to do after finding everything out. When I woke up in the morning, I checked her page out of curiosity. There was a video posted of her with another man. I couldn't stomach watching it, so I just closed it. I was beyond pissed that she had done that. Not only was it cheating, it was irresponsible. She didn't know where that man had been. He could have given her any kind of STD, and she didn't consider that. I decided that I was going to take the sights away from her. She had amassed quite the following, and it looked like it was only growing after she slept with a fan. I had an idea, and I didn't know exactly how feasible it would be because sites like these don't always seem to care, but I reported her as being underaged. I hoped that it would get the sites taken down so she would be banned from them. I reported that on all of the sites that I knew about. My girlfriend got back home, and she messaged me asking where I was. I told her that I knew about her real job and what she had just gone to do. She tried to explain it to me. She told me that she needed more followers and that sleeping with a fan was a good way to get them. She had read articles about other girls doing similar things and gaining tens of thousands of followers. I wasn't interested in an explanation. She cheated on me, and that's the only way I looked at it. I also shamed her for putting the video that I barely wanted to do online. I told her that it was over and I would be getting all of my things from the apartment as soon as I found another one. She begged me for a second chance and told me that I was more important to her than any of the other stuff. I just didn't care. We broke up and I found another apartment a few weeks later. The last time I ever saw her was when I was moving my furniture out. Out of curiosity, I checked the websites that she had her accounts on and I saw that 3 of them were deleted. I was glad to see that it was the 3 where she had the most followers. She still had 2 other accounts, and I knew that she would probably regain the traction she had on the other websites, but even if it was a temporary setback, I was happy with it. Opie, your girlfriend clearly didn't take what you would think about it into consideration at all. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have had any of the websites that she did. I think it's very messed up that she posted the video that she'd taken with you on her sites. You didn't give any consent for her to do that, and by the way, it seems she almost coerced you into making the video to begin with. That in itself is a huge breach of your trust, and I think she showed her true colors with that. Your girlfriend trying to excuse cheating on you with some random fan as a business-savvy marketing move is ridiculous. Cheating is cheating regardless of the circumstances. She sold raffle tickets to sleep with another man. I agree it is very irresponsible to do that. Unless she ran a full background check, screened him for STDs, and had a bodyguard present while she was there, it just seems incredibly unsafe. From what you described, it doesn't even sound like she really needed a huge bump in followers. You did the right thing by leaving her when you found out. It definitely seems like she didn't have much respect for you as a person because of how often she lied to you. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.